Ciao a tutti, it's me, Babza Jr. As you probably know by now, I am a proud Italian. So when I heard that there was a Soulslike game based on Italian folklore, I knew I had to check it out. So come with me as I tell you about my experience playing Enotria the Last Song from start to finish, giving my perspective both as an Italian and a gamer, as well as also providing some tips if you decide to play this game yourself. Starting off, the opening cutscene talks about many characters I recognize instantly from Italian Carnevale and nursery rhymes I used to sing when I was a child, such as Pulcinella, Arlecchino, Pantalone, Balanzone. I could name them all, but you probably haven't got time for that. A special shout out though goes to Colombina, as I used to dress up like her during Carnevale when I was a kid. A minute in, and it's already got my attention. They've done a good job setting up the theme they've decided to go with, and the art style of the images really matches it well. You start out as the maskless one, looking like a wooden puppet. The game has all the classic Soul stuff, including light and heavy attacks, dodging, parrying, and a stagger system when you inflict enough damage on an opponent, leaving them open to a critical attack. Oh, and let's not forget a golden flask you drink from to restore your health called Armonia. A little further in, I met the first boss, the Force of Change. Hey look, it says Morte when you die. Bellissimo. I got a strong sense from this boss that the game wants you to parry. Unfortunately, something I've never really practiced and been good at in the Souls games. The parry system is a bit like Sekiro in that if you do it at the right time, you take no damage and the enemy's unraveling meter fills up, letting you do a critical attack once it's at full. Do it at the wrong time though and you'll take a bit of damage. It took me a while to understand when to press the parry button because it takes the character a little time to move their arm into position. I guess my first impression is that things feel a little stiff, giggity. Dodging doesn't seem to move you that far out of the way, and there were several times where I felt like I had parried at the right time but I still took damage. Eventually, I was able to land enough successful parries, and after about 6 or so critical attacks, our first foe was vanquished. Just beyond, we found a first corda risonante, the equivalent of a bonfire. Now, I got to be honest, I don't think the game did a great job of explaining this next part. I was suddenly hit with a lot of information all at once. You can have 3 different loadouts that you can switch between, which was straightforward enough. There's also different masks you can wear to give different effects, but then there's also different aspects you can equip to increase your stats. Plus, you now have access to skills called mask lines, which you can equip and use after building them up by doing damage to enemies. But there's also this massive Path of Innovators map, where you use a currency that the game never really explains how to acquire to unlock different skills. Initially, I thought just unlocking the skills meant they were now active, but actually each individual node is a single skill that you can only equip into one of 6 slots on each of the 3 loadouts. Typical Italians start to bombard you with this level of information all at once, so I suppose it's in keeping with the game's theme. It's a bit like going back home for holidays, where you just want to chill, and instead, you have your nonna giving you a summary of what's happened in the village in the last year. As for stats, the game has just 5 to work with. Bruiser, which increases your health and defense, Assassin, to increase your attack, Elementalist, to increase elemental and status effect damage, Trickster, to boost your stamina and pouch size, and finally Battle Mage to increase the damage of mask line skills and reduce their recharge time. We level up these stats using Memoria, this game's equivalent of souls, runes or blood echoes. At least that seems simple enough. Switching between the loadouts is done with the press of a button, so in theory you could have 3 completely different builds that could switch through at will, which is a pretty cool idea. You also have a magic stomp that can break certain walls and floors. I decided to go for the halberd weapon for now for a bit of range. Up ahead was the thing I've been waiting for, stepping out in this gorgeous looking Italian countryside. This was beautiful and actually made me a bit emotional and feel all warm inside, because it was very reminiscent of the small village I come from back home. But of course, this guy ambushing me soon reminded me I'm playing a Soulslike. It still keeps in line with that Italian theme though, as he also reminded me of this guy ambushing me in real life as soon as I stepped foot outside my door back home. But that's a story for another time. Still really cool to take this genre of game, which is normally confined to dark, horrible places, into such a beautiful environment. If you ever want to find out more, there's also the compendium, which is full of information about the lore of the game. I also want to mention some of the names of the items. There's a big theme on Italian foodstuffs, like this one called Invigorating Minestrone. Got to love an invigorating minestrone. I bet it's Baron's Castle favourite.
Bitch, please. I invented the invigorating minestrone. I'm like the Giovanni Rana of the invigorating minestrone. You could combine 1,000 Italian nonnas and they couldn't make a better invigorating minestrone than I can. So suck it, Gino da Campo. Okay, Babs, I said the thing. Can you please let me out of the basement now?
Or how about some miracle pesto to cure any status effect? Speaking of status effects, there are 4 elements in this game: Fatuo, Vis, Malanno and Gratia, each with a status effect tied to it. They work in a Pokemon typing system of each element being weak or strong against another. For example, this crab is a Vis type, so it would be weak to Fatuo type weapons or mask lines. If we had any at this point, of course. Anyway, let's move forward. I level up a few of my stats and also equip a few different skills we've unlocked from the Path of Innovators, including one which builds the enemy's unraveling meter when you dodge an attack. Up ahead, I find another use for a magic stomp. By using it on these symbols, it makes hidden pathways appear, allowing you to get treasure that would normally be out of your reach. Weirdly, I felt this mechanic was actually kind of underused in the game. There were large periods where it just didn't show up whatsoever, and honestly, I like this kind of puzzle element. There's also a non-stomp version of the rifts, which you just interact with to make bridges and other stuff appear. Making my way into this cute little town, which again reminds me of home, I found a place to upgrade my weapons and then bumped into Pulcinella, who it turned out would be a key character in this game, guiding you through many parts of it. But no time to dwell on that now, because guess what this game has? Dogs. Of course he has dogs. Why is he always fucking dogs? Anyway, I now upgraded my Albert to +4 and get my stats to multiples of 5 because, as you may know, I like that. Now, another thing I found was these red rifts. Activating them puts you in difficult circumstances with tough enemies, something that feels like it was taken direct from God of War. Weirdly, it didn't really seem like you get much reward for doing these. I'm not sure if I'm missing something there. Once I'd felt like I'd explored the town thoroughly enough, I encountered the next boss, Curtis Prince of Laughter. Proper Italian name there. This guy was a bit of a dick. So, one thing that they definitely seem to like in this game is shitty small boss arenas. Getting some space to heal was tough, especially as the dodge doesn't seem to take you very far. I used a combination of the mask lines, some of which did great damage, and the spin to win attack of my Arbid when I had an opening to do so. I did nearly die at the end after getting caught by this attack, but managed to survive and finish him off. I leveled up Bruiser, Assassin and Trickster, and then pressed on with my journey, nearly being run over by some barrels. Up ahead, I found probably the most intricate rift stomping puzzle of the whole game. This required stomping 4 different rifts and doing some running and jumping before the platforms they created disappeared, all to get a new mask line. Again, I would have liked to have seen more puzzles like this in the game. I then encountered something that we did see more of, non-boss enemies with crazy amounts of health and damage. I think this one was supposed to be a mini-boss because it took a lot of hits to bring him down, and he took off half my health with each hit. What's worse is there was a red rift variant of this enemy in this room. Look how small this room is! I guess the game really wanted to just stand still and parry, but it still seems a little awkward. Anyway, at least I had enough Memoria to get a few more levels in, but now it was time for the first real boss of the game, Zanni. A giant guy who somehow seems to be vomiting up a smaller version of himself. I have to give them points for being creative. But, I got to be honest, this fight was a bit of a mess. I need to go up close to him to get damage in, but because of the way his smaller body hangs out, it can make it difficult to see his attacks. The other issue this fight highlights is the lock-on. For whatever reason, even in boss fights, the range of the lock-on is really short. Sometimes it just goes when he does his jumping attacks or if I get too far away from him, which can be really confusing. And if anyone comments not to use lock-on and problem solved, no thank you. He also has a crazy amount of health and the hitboxes for some of his attacks are a bit suspect. I decided to do a combination of farming and testing out some different weapons on this guy outside, and ended up switching to the Ultra Greatsword weapon. I still felt like the damage was pitiful, but this did seem to be building up his unraveling meter faster. This was the key to victory more than anything else, as the critical attack did monster damage and still left him open for a few more hits after the animation for it had finished, already building his unraveling meter again. With a few more sword swings and mask lines, we open him up for another critical attack and finish him off. After watching a very overdramatic death scene in true Italian style, we get to see a very stuttery cutscene showing us our next destination. But this also unlocks the Theatre of Masks, basically the equivalent of a Firelink shrine. There's lots of different rooms and even the only merchant in the game. The best thing in his inventory was this game's equivalent of a divine blessing, Columbina's pizza. This made me so happy because pizza is life, pizza is everything. Basically, pizza is my soulmate. Just to put it into perspective, there's Lich Jr., pizza, then JK. JK would not be impressed with me saying this, but then he shouldn't have married an Italian. Before going into the area that cutscene showed us, there was one other area I found in Quinta to explore, the Monastery of Maya. Worth mentioning, we put on Zanni's mask and kept it for the rest of the run as it gives us more healing items. This area is like the one area in every Souls game where there's a bunch of magic spamming dickheads. It looks beautiful though. But one thing that's not beautiful is the boss, Vermiglio. Because of course, we got to have a magic spamming boss for a magic spamming area. This guy was pretty annoying, but at least it felt like we were doing more damage to him than to Zanni. Staying at distance is not a good idea, because he just spams spells at you. These slow-moving projectiles especially are really annoying. His melee attacks, though, can also be a bit tricky because they have more range than you'd expect, and for some reason I really struggled to parry them. I found the Ultra Greatsword was too slow and I kept getting interrupted, so I tried with some different weapons again, like the Blessed Rapier for Gratia damage, supposedly super effective. But Gratia applies some weird status effect that actually heals the boss? I read online that it's supposed to make them explode when you hit them, but it never seemed to work. Apparently, there has recently been a patch which has fixed this issue though. In the end, I decided on the Juniper Sword for some faster attacks. This let me get multiple attacks in when I had an opening. The first phase went by pretty quickly with this strategy, but his second phase he starts shooting lasers and making explosions come out of the ground. He can actually also heal himself every time he hits you if he builds up the Fatuo status on you. My strategy was to land a critical attack and then land the meteoric impact mask line on him as he stood up. It was what I would call a Bab's victory in the end. I had no healing and very low health, but I managed to build up his unraveling meter with some hits and then parried his attacks at a crucial moment. A critical attack and a smash with a giant hammer as he got up finally took this guy down. What an absolute bellend. But it seems our adventures in this area weren't over. Interacting with the back of the room takes you to an area called the Old Sanctuary, and it looks like there's another boss right away. And guess what? It's another Fatuo spell spammer, Maya, goddess of life and death. Weirdly, I say this was easier than the last boss overall. She had a lot of more passive movements where we could get attacks in, but some of her moves did insane damage. As she was a bit slower, I switched back to the trusty Ultra Greatsword to get that unraveling meter to build up quicker. There were still some close calls, but on my fourth attempt I was able to take her down with the same combination of critical attacks followed by meteoric impact. Defeating her actually brings her back to the Theatre of Masks. I think she wanted me to do something for her, but I never actually figured it out. Pulcinella didn't help much either. Cheers, dude. So it's finally time to head down the main story route we saw earlier. And guess what? There's another boss already. This lumberjack was pretty annoying. Until his AI froze and he just stood there while I beat him to death. I thought the critical attack might break him out of it, but nope. He got back up and continued to stand in place. I regret nothing. At least we get to move into this next beautiful area. I know I said this already, but once again, this little beauty just brings back memories of home. All the time spent at the beach, sunbathing and just chilling. Go ahead, be jealous, I'll allow it. We're here taking in the beauty of all this, and within 2 seconds, I find another boss just down the road. The Spaventa Gatekeeper, buffed with the Malanno poison element. After upgrading this awesome ultra greatsword we picked up earlier, and speaking to Pulcinella again, we go back to give the Gatekeeper another try. It's worth mentioning that this enemy design is reused a lot in this area, with basically the exact same moveset but different elements. All of them use these crazy projectiles which absolutely melt down our health, and they are really annoying. Luckily, a new sword has the Fato element, which heals us with each hit once we proc the status effect, and it does a lot of damage. I also enjoyed this shield slam mask line, which did mega damage after a critical, and soon after we finished this guy off. The Knight's Monolith Ultra Greatsword was my main weapon for the rest of the run, along with the Silver Wasp Longsword for a bit of speed. I kept moving forward, traversing down some cliffs and encountering a giant crab boss. After the gauntlet of annoying bosses, it was nice to find an easy one for once. Its moves were easy to read, and I beat this thing on my first attempt without too much effort. Here's my stats, by the way, in case you were curious. I then smashed up this giant stone man, found myself in this new area Necropolis, and then beat down some skeletons. I managed to get a Knight's Monolith up to +7 now, which I'm pretty happy with. Good timing, because there's a Gratia type boss up ahead, the Last Breach Defender. I have to say, some of these mini bosses do feel a bit pointless. There's nothing even after this one, it's just a dead end. The rewards are nice at least, I guess. I mean, it let me upgrade the sword again, so that's something. After a lot of wandering around, we end up in the Thermae Caves, one of the more confusing areas of the game. I again started to notice the repeat enemy designs a bit. For example, I killed this boss here, but then literally right out the door from the boss, there's an enemy who looks exactly the same as it. I would have liked to see some more variety here, instead of being in some sort of enemy inception. Get it? Inception but with enemies? Get it? Gosh, I spend way too much time with my husband. Best move on swiftly, eh? This level has a rift at the start which, when you activate it, moves the big statue down lower, allowing you to proceed. I spent a long time wandering around this area. It seems that there were a million shortcuts and different routes to explore. There was also a horrifying platforming section that made me shit myself with each jump. At the least, the item at the end was a worthwhile upgrade material. I also died here because I saw this little opening as I was going down this lift, and, from playing the Souls games, I jumped to it out of instinct, thinking that it was a secret route, but it was nothing. What a cock tease. I had to jump off and die. I then tried to get my memoria back, but they left them on that ledge. I tried to get to it, but got stuck on another ledge and ended up losing them. The rage was real at this point. After what felt like forever, I finally found the way to go and got just the second corda risonante of this area. I pressed forward to find another of these red rifts, indicating a tough fight, but to my surprise, this one actually contained a boss. Veltha, God of Strife, was by far the toughest boss I encountered. As well as some brutal melee combos, they actually healed themselves at half health all the way back to full. This was the first boss that I felt too underpowered to defeat. As it was optional, I decided to come back to this later. Instead, we took on the Sunken Colossus boss fight just beyond. This was again a reskin of an enemy we encountered earlier. Not much to say except the way this thing works is really funny. Anyway, easy boss. After another enemy whose AI seemed to break while fighting them, I found this more well-lit area filled with some Spaventa Gatekeeper type enemies and then another Spaventa Gatekeeper boss, this time of the Vis element, in a room with an archer shooting us from above. Great. I decided to explore a bit more, killing off the archers and also leveled up. this time by putting points into Battle Mage to boost the power of our mask lines. On the next attempt, I got through the Beast Gatekeeper thanks to the high damage of my sword and landing some mask lines and a critical. This small arena can fuck off though. By the way, I felt like it's a good time to mention, this game has throwing knives! JK was really happy about this. But he also has kamikaze dogs. Seriously, this dog ran at me and exploded. Before now, I'd saved mask lines mainly for bosses, but there's so many of these Spaventa Gatekeeper type guys, so using them was the only way forward. Oh, and speaking of which, he's the Gratia Spaventa Gatekeeper boss. By this point, I had these guys down. He did have a new attack where he flies up and swings a projectile at you, but it was easy to dodge because we have decent space to fight for once. I'm guessing there's going to be a Fato Gatekeeper somewhere up ahead. I pressed on through this tricky area where I got shot by a cannon, but at least this dog decided to be kind and jump off for me. What's up with this weird dancing guy though? You know what we haven't had in a while though? A magic spamming boss. But the High Priestess of Veltha also has a bunch of normal enemies. There were points where I couldn't even see what was going on here. The damage from some of the attacks was silly, taking me out from around 80% health. One good thing is that helpers go down very easily, but you have to be quick or she'll take you out. With the helpers down, this was a much easier fight. Malanno from the Silver Wasp helped to chip away at her health. I hid behind the pillars when I needed to heal, and I learned here you can actually do a critical hit from behind. I finished her off, but I actually died as she did. If you're wondering why that happened, well, turns out the Malanno poison can actually affect you if you stand too near an enemy that's inflicted with it. I didn't know. Thankfully, it still counted as a win, even though if you watch my one-shot video, you would know I'm not a fan of trading. I let it slide this time primarily because I didn't do a save state and fuck this boss anyway. Up ahead, I encountered some more awkwardness with me getting stuck in a gap with an enemy on top of me. I literally had to walk back to the corda, go back and kill the enemy, and then drop down into the same gap to rescue my Memoria. Thankfully, I could jump out again. After taking out yet more Spaventa Gatekeeper type enemies, we face the final of the Spaventa Gatekeeper bosses. This guy turned out to be way harder than the previous three. He had insane health and he fired multiple projectiles which did huge damage. I kinda knew this was leading to the end of this area, so before bashing my head against him some more, I went back to tie up some loose ends. There was a route to a Colosseum that I hadn't explored, guarded by a Sanctum Zealot boss who, although he hit hard, wasn't able to stand up to a critical attack and shield bash mask line combo. But in the Colosseum lurked a very dangerous boss, one with a very unique look compared to the many armored guys with sword bosses we've faced recently. Giangurgolo. Giangurgolo reminded me of a lot of my friend Ian the Sanctuary Guard from Dark Souls 1. I mean, he even has Ian in his name. Coincidence? I think not. I debated whether to rename him Ian il Gurgolo at some point. This guy was very tough, and once again the Loconicious reared their ugly head. The main trick to this guy is parrying. Many of his moves can be parried, and particularly if you parry the phase 2 White Eye Charge at the right time, you get a great attack window. He confuses you a bit in the later parts of the fight by doing a Red Eye Charge, which he can be staggered out of even if you do a perfect parry. But then, he'll immediately follow up with the White Eye Charge right afterwards. This caught me off guard a few times and I choked right as he was about to die. I also had some awful junk where I got stuck in the corner with him on top of me, unable to escape. I've seen some guides online saying that parrying him is a waste of time and not worth it. I have to 100% disagree. Parry him as much as possible, especially in the first phase. Any of his pounces or close wipes can be parried pretty easily. Do that and just get one hit in after. Be patient, which I know is rich coming from me, but trust me, it pays off. For the second phase, just dodge everything else and wait for the White Eye Charge. If you work out the timing, you can nail it almost every time and is by far the safest window to attack. You can even do mass lines after it. This was by far the longest fight of my playthrough so far. So again, patience is key. And after 7 minutes, he finally went down. Ciao Ian. Good boss fight. Maybe my favourite so far, even if it was intense. If you speak to this Custode guy after wearing Giangurgolo's mask, he gives you another mask, but honestly, I still just stuck with Zannis. The other thing we hadn't done yet was going back to Bertha. Was I strong enough now to take them down? I swapped over the Silver Wasp for this, as it felt like speed was crucial. I actually chucked some of my random consumables at them, like the Receptacle of Malady and the Flask of Viz, which actually did do decent damage. After that, I stayed at distance and baited their range attacks to parry them. If you manage to parry the orbs in the second phase, it helps to fill up their unraveling meter a lot, and the old mask line after a critical trick helps as always. The Malanno from a sword help to keep their health chipping away, and eventually they go down as well. Things are starting to look up. Bertha also moves back to the Theatre of Mask for some quests that I couldn't be bothered with. I double checked online to see if I missed any other bosses so far and found the Huntress of Bertha, who compared to those last two bosses was an absolute piece of cake. But none of this meant anything if I couldn't beat the Fato Gatekeeper. This guy took the most attempts of any boss so far. I actually went with a combo weapon approach here. I used the Silver Wasp up until his unraveling meter was close to filling up, and then switched to our Knight's Monolith to deliver the critical attack. I will mention, the thing that seemed to really help with this was equipping a skill which reduces the damage of range attacks. But the main tip I'd give is when he flies up to fire his projectiles, just back away as far as possible. Most of the time you can outrange these and they buff out the most deadly attacks. Just don't get stuck at one end of the boss arena like this. Eventually, with enough persistence, we'll land the final critical to end this fight. Surely the next boss won't be as bad, right? The final boss of this area is Capitan Spaventa, and honestly, I am sick of saying the word Spaventa at this point, especially after fighting this testa di cazzo. I died a lot to this guy. I tried parrying, I tried my different weapons, but it just seemed to be able to smash through my defenses and destroy me while I struggled to do almost any damage to him. I've said already, some bosses are crazy health, but this guy's health bar seemed to barely go down. The only thing that did any meaningful damage was the mask lines, so I decided to take a bit of risk. I respect to a mask line focused build. I put more points into Battle Mage, bringing it all the way up to 50. This reduces their charge time and increases their damage. I also added a bunch of skills that would help. In particular, one that charges the lines when I drink my Armonia, one that heals whenever I use a mask line, and one that has a chance to charge up all my lines whenever I use a mask line. All the ones I equipped were capable of staggering him, which was hugely important. The Grand Celebration Hand Slam, exclusive to Zanni's mask in particular, did huge damage. After just a few minutes of stacking up the mask lines quickly, we bring him down at last. Only for a little guy to pop out of him and run away. This was the real Spaventa all along. This phase was pretty hilarious, but I was still worried about dying after all this, given I had no healing left. Plus, he summoned soldiers to attack me, which doesn't help. Thankfully, I chased him down and killed him, completing this area at last. With that done, I head down to the pier in the first town to take a boat ride to the final area of the game, Litumnia. Making our way through the docks, I kill some enemies and another giant crab boss before arriving in the city proper. The city has all the stuff we've seen so far, like dogs jumping to their death, spell spamming dickheads, and mini bosses in small arenas, such as our friend Moretta here. This battle mage build is pretty broken though. Just go into a boss fight, neck a few swigs of our Armonia, and unleash all the mask lines for a pretty easy win. So satisfying. I made my way to the Engineers Guild and... oh my god, are those little Italian mushroom children! 10 out of 10 game. Shut up and take my money. There's a few more mini bosses we encountered on the way through here, but there's not too much to say about them because our build has just become insanely strong now. Honestly, the normal enemies pose more of an issue, like these guys with the drill lances, and of course the worst enemy of all, platforming. Especially timed platforming. I took a giant lift downwards into the mines of Gratia below and had to find another giant crab boss. This was maybe the worst example of a small shitty arena yet. Whoever decided to put this giant crab in this room needs to get a life ASAP. I'll never get tired of these dogs running off the ledges. Bye, dog. I spent way too long getting these guys to fall off. Anyway, here's another reskin of the Colossus boss. I mean, at least they made him look a bit different this time. Even with that powerful build, it took a lot to kill this thing. Moretta then popped up again, but we quickly handed her a defeat. Get it? Hand? Okay. I've really been hanging out with my husband too much. Moving on. In the next area, I solve a puzzle involving lowering the water by pushing a series of levers until we make it to the astronomer's court. Here, I found yet another spell spamming boss full of AoE and projectiles. Luckily, I demolished them quickly, but this seems to be a trope they like a lot. Same with these Colossus guys. At least this one throws a giant javelin, so that's something a bit different. Moretta then attacks us for the last time, but this doesn't go much better for her, even if I do get poisoned. The ability that lets me have hyper armor while we cast our mask lines so I don't get interrupted while casting them really makes a big difference here. Moretta goes down again shortly after. So at last I reached the end of this area. You just know that there's going to be a big boss coming up. And I was right, it's Pantalone e Balanzone, the game's one and only duo boss fight. And Nick named them Italian Godskin Duo, because that's honestly what this felt like. Although in fairness, this fight was way less annoying than Godskin Duo. That's not to say that these guys don't do huge damage though. Thankfully, several of our mask lines can hit both of them at the same time, which really helps to make these a bit more manageable. Funeral Blaze especially helped to weaken them both, and once Balanzone is down, Pantalone falls shortly after. But guess what? That's not the end of the fight. They transform into a giant multi-limbed monster. A kind of a weird experience with this. I'm not sure if it was glitched or not, but on my first attempt it felt like I got hit by loads of attacks but they barely did any damage to me. I actually very nearly took them out first try, with my critical attack taking out almost all the health. But right at the end, they suddenly fired a bunch of homing projectiles which took me out instantly. To say I was raging is an understatement. On the next attempt, I managed to get back to the same position, land a critical, but this time I landed some more mask lines before they could recover, taking off the last of their health. After a pretty funny cutscene of them arguing with each other, keeping very much the Italian theme alive, another boss is defeated. Before heading on to the final area, I finished off a weird quest line where I had to wear different masks to answer these frogs' riddles. It was a fun little addition and ended with me going to this cool looking place, but all I got rewarded with was a pretty average looking weapon which I didn't have any intention of using. If anyone has also done this and knows if this weapon is actually worthwhile for any reason, let me know in the comments below. But anyway, back to the Theatre of Masks, and Pulcinella tells me it's time to head to Strale Velata, the final area of the game. He also gives me a lot of attitude on the way, telling me that I'm inferior to him. Alright, you know, bed. I have to say, this area is one of the coolest looking in the game. Definitely feels like the appropriate place for a final boss battle. Pulcinella meets me again and he laments all that's happened to get us to this point. The final boss is Arlecchino, just as I expected, and he certainly lives up to that title. I got slain by his fast combos many times, but my tried and tested battle mage build didn't let me down, until he started healing up to full health. That could be an issue. He actually does this multiple times throughout the fight, 3 in total I believe. One really cool moment was when I used Funeral Blaze right as he teleported behind me, hitting him and opening up for a critical. Definitely knew he was going to teleport and didn't just get lucky there. Nope. Thank God for the mask lines, because my sword felt like it did next to no damage, even with a critical. His multi-hit combo is the most dangerous attack. easily taking off nearly all my health unless I got out of the way ASAP. In the end, I actually landed Funeral Blaze right as he teleported again, ending the fight. Pulcinella then tells us to reach out and touch Arlecchino to fulfill our purpose. Doing this actually drains us of all our life force to give Arlecchino new life, and it shows a scene with Pulcinella saying there is much left to do as they plan to try and create the perfect world. Now, that is the end of the game, but I made a save state, because there is another ending. If you instead attack and kill Arlecchino, it triggers a new cutscene where Pulcinella gets really angry and now the true final boss fight begins. Well, that's okay. I'm sure the Battle Mage build will... Wait, what? Where did my mask go? Why can't I use my mask lines? So yeah, this is kind of bullshit. Pulcinella takes away your current mask and makes it so you can't use any mask lines during the fight. What's worse is that you now can't respec your stats because it was Pulcinella who does this, so my build is now basically useless. Apparently, it used to be Velta who could respec your stats, but they changed it in one of the more recent patches. It feels really harsh to basically completely nerf your build if you focused on the Battle Mage stat and not give you the ability to change that now. What's worse is, Pulcinella is really difficult, spamming lasers and of course healing himself up. This legitimately feels unfair, and I saw many people online felt the same way, saying they never completed the game because this last fight was bullshit. I did consider not completing it because I was hating it so much, but I was just too stubborn to give up. So, when I'd almost given up hope and couldn't think of many more strategies to beat him, I had an epiphania. I thought of trying to rely on parrying. After all, that's what the game wanted you to do to begin with, no? After beating Arlecchino, you can buy the Magnum Opus gem from the merchant. The gem basically does an incredible amount of posture damage when you block, so I bought and equipped it. Then went in there and waited for him to do this multiple orb attack. You can actually parry all these very easily, and it does so much posture damage that it not only opens him up for a critical, but it builds his bar up to almost full for the next critical. I got quite lucky here in that he kept doing this attack and I just ran back and avoided everything else. The only other time I hit him was when he was doing the healing. I believe keeping distance from him seems to bait him into doing this attack. Either that or the laser. Trust me, this strategy made the fight a lot easier, and I promise if you do this, you'll get through it too. With that done, we get the real ending of the game as we walk off strumming his lute. So, that's Enotria. Honestly, I have mixed feelings. I love the representation of Italy in this game, both the scenery and the folklore characters. I had fun, but there were frustrating parts throughout, mainly down to how stiff the movement and combat feels at points. I think there is a good game in here, but it's a bit rough around the edges. I hope the devs continue to work on and patch the game, and I think even with these flaws, I would still recommend giving this game a try. I've been Babza Jr., thanks for watching, and ciao for now.